In this video, I'm going to show you the Super 1+1 from IQUNIX, which is currently in group buy until the 25th of September from several vendors and direct from IQUNIX, all of which are linked in the description below. IQUNIX Super is a new project from IQUNIX targeting the custom and high-end keyboard community. At the moment, they appear to be focusing on making unique-looking high-quality CNC Aluminium keyboards, with several models due for release in the coming months. While the 1+1 is selling through in the group buy format, it's more like a limited pre-order, as time from end of sales run to shipping is estimated at just 2 months or less. The price is getting up there on this one, starting from $349 as a bare bone, so we'll be looking closely to see if the keyboard warrants the price. The big selling point with this one is that there are supposed to be different modular and customizable layouts. None of these extra modules are on sale yet, but we'll see what we can find in terms of where and how these are added. Let's move on to unboxing and find out exactly what I've been sent, as I have no idea what version or extras I have in the box. In the top layer of the box there is a bunch of smaller boxes with all the accessories, and in the second layer, and much to my surprise, is the keyboard fully assembled apart from the keycaps, with the moonstone switches already installed in the white, blue, red and grey colourway, all wrapped in plastic. This was a surprise because I was expecting to receive a kit and not a keyboard. Split between the various boxes, I received a POM plate, the 1+1 keycap set, a toolkit including a very nice aluminium switch and keycap puller, and an aluminium screwdriver with 2 bits. There is a nice quality coiled cable with an aviator connector, a 2.4 GHz wireless receiver, a USB-A to USB-C adapter, then some documents including a very nice plastic quick start guide. Given this one is fully assembled, I'll just pop the keycaps on and do a stock out-of-the-box typing test. The switches are a pre-lubed linear, not long pole, with an actuation force of 37 grams, described as being deep and thocky on the IQUNIX website. Initial thoughts on the stock typing test are pretty decent, and this will likely be your cup of tea if you're a fan of a deeper, thocky and creamy sound profile. The spacebar is a little weak, but this is stock out of the box, and it's a very rare occurrence for a fully assembled keyboard to come with perfectly tuned stabilizers. For my taste, the spacebar definitely needs work, the switches are too light, and it sounds a little too foamy. In terms of the gasket, there's plenty of movement through the gaskets themselves that this keyboard doesn't need to rely on flex. It's a really nice gasket that isn't made too stiff by the case foam underneath. For me, in this configuration, the typing experience doesn't really match the striking and unique aesthetic, nor does it represent the typing experience I hoped for from a $477 keyboard, which is what this specific build will cost direct from IQUNIX, as it's the tri-mode wireless version and it comes with the IQUNIX switches and keycaps. Just to touch on the aesthetic, IQUNIX have delivered exactly what I'd hoped for as a long-time customer and fan, which is a very striking and unique looking keyboard, which is what they've always done with their plastic keyboards. There's a lot going on with this one. It has a very modern but retro vibe about it, with the mixed colour modular top case making it really interesting. I really like the red and blue top case sections around the navigation keys with the white badge used to connect them, and I really like the plus, minus and X lighting on the left, which double up as the wireless pairing mode indicator and the caps lock light. I'm definitely not a fan of the keycaps, mainly because of the legends. It usually doesn't bother me, but on this one I really don't like the all caps modifiers. I think because the modifier font is so big, and I don't like how they've double lined single words on the control keys top right. I also would have preferred to have the blocker between the function and num rows you get on TKLs, but with this great modular case design and colour scheme, it's a nice looking case. I would have just preferred having more of it to look at when choosing a TKL layout. On the side profile you can see it's a fairly standard block on wedge shape, but because so much of the case is made from individually CNC'd aluminium parts, we have the bottom case in grey, the wedge in white, with a stainless steel external weight. So like I say, there's a lot to look at from all angles with this one. Now considering this is $349 as a bare bone, I want to do the sort of build out I would do on any keyboard at this price, which is to run some of my favourite switches and a set of GMK keycaps. I'll be using Gateron cream sodas in my build, which is a very nice pre-lubed long pole switch, and I'm thrilled to see a bit of a colour theme with the red stems and the red on the case. I'll be using GMK redacted keycaps, a black on white set which have been patiently waiting for a keyboard to come along. Again, a great set of keycaps with the just off-white looking nice on the 1+1 and with just a splattering of red on this redacted X keycap to continue the theme. Let's see how it sounds. So that's better for me in terms of both the sound and feel, because I prefer the sound and the heavier feel of the cream sodas, and I always prefer the sound and feel of ABS GMK cylindrical keycaps over everything else. That said, it's not my favourite sound in the world because of all the dampening in here. This particular brand of deep and thocky is generally more sought after by people newer to the hobby and is often created through the overuse of foam. But once you're deep into the hobby and you have some premium aluminium keyboards in your collection, it becomes much more important for them to have some individuality than for them to just sound really similar to one another. Primarily this means using dampening as needed to cover up specific issues with the sound, as opposed to just running all the dampening by default on every board, which makes all keyboards start to sound similar to one another. Switch sheets and the PE foam mod are probably the biggest culprits in giving all keyboards a similar sound profile, which is less good in aluminium keyboards but usually works wonders in plastic keyboards where there's some shortcomings in the sound. So what I'll do next is a full disassembly to both take a look at the build, but mainly to allow me to do a build without foams. Building without any foams is the best way to identify what, if any, dampening is needed to get the keyboard where you want it to be. Disassembly is not bad on this one at all, and you have all the tools you need in the box for case and plate and PCB disassembly. You only need a small Phillips head screwdriver if you want to remove the stabilizers. I'm doing a full disassembly including plate and PCB, so I took off the keycaps and removed the switches before getting into case disassembly. After removing the keycaps, I noticed I'd scratched the top case with the switch puller. They look like pencil marks, not deep scratches, but they do take a lot of rubbing to remove, and in some areas they don't seem to want to come off completely. The red and blue top case sections didn't mark, and when you feel the two side by side, it's clear that there's a different coating or a different quality to the finish. The red and blue is a smoother finish, while the white is more powdery feeling. This keyboard is disassembled and built from the bottom to the top. You flip it over, remove the 4 rubber feet, and remove the 4 screws from the wedge which houses the batteries. Tilt it up carefully as there is a ribbon cable to remove which connects the daughter board to the PCB. With the wedge off and the batteries exposed, you unplug and remove the batteries for removing the bottom case. Remove the case screws which are all over the place like this, as they are securing the separate modules of the top case. I will say some of these screws were quite over-torqued, which I never like to see on aluminium keyboards, so be careful with over-torqued screws on the second install. Once all the screws are out, you keep the keyboard facing down and lift off the bottom case. Disconnect the ribbon wire from the caps lock lighting and disconnect the ribbon wire connecting the two PCBs to one another. Then you can remove the dampening pads and lift out the plate and PCB assemblies. I thought there was another thin sheet of some kind in the bottom case, but there doesn't appear to be on this one. The screws securing the plate and PCB are 2 screws and a floating standoff, so you can remove the screw from either side, leaving the standoffs on the plate or on the PCB. With those out, you can separate the plate foam, switch sheet and PCB. Finally, I unscrewed the stabilizers and removed them for lubing, and that's the keyboard stripped down into its component parts. I must say, it's easy to see where the $349 starting price comes from on this one. Not only are there 7 individually CNC machined parts including the weight, but the CNC job is not basic at all. Between the studs, the threaded holes, the gasket profiles and various other profiles, there is a heap of machining to do here, and on different machining runs and programs as they are separate parts. That said, there is perhaps a line between paying a premium price for a premium and unique keyboard and paying more than is necessary for an overcomplicated design, and I'm not sure yet on which side of the line this falls. One thing I can tell you for sure is that there are no issues with quality here, everything looks great. We've got a 1.2mm PCB without flex cuts, the 1.2mm thickness bodes well in terms of allowing some minor flex, while the lack of flex cuts bodes well in terms of a potentially decent sound profile when I run without foams. I can see a row of LEDs under where the badge sits on the small PCB, so maybe there's a clear badge coming in the future. The FR4 plate seems to have way too many flex cuts to me. In fact, it's more cuts than plate, which is over the top given there are no flex cuts in the PCB to coincide with the cuts on the plate. The stabilizer housings are wide, and so the cutouts in the plate are obviously nice and wide, and we'll even take a set of Stabies, which is one of the wider stabilizer housings on the market. The stabilizers themselves had a good factory lube job, with lube not only applied to the wire but also to the outside of the stem and inside of the housing, which is rare. I can see there isn't enough lube on the wire, so all I'll do is add some lube now, but you could easily do this with a syringe if you didn't want to disassemble. Unfortunately, it was at this point that I realised I had no spare gaskets for the POM plate, and the gaskets on the FR4 plate won't peel off without ripping, so no POM plate typing test for us today. Now we're going to rebuild with no foams at all, so we'll reassemble the plate and PCB, installing the switches in the plate and PCB assembly before reassembling the keyboard. Then we're obviously building the same as it came apart, upside down, building from the top case to the bottom case. Place the top case sections facing down on the desk, drop in the plate and PCB assemblies, connect the ribbon wire joining the two PCBs and the ribbon wire connecting the caps lock light. Land the grey bottom case on top, making sure everything lines up, then secure it with the 12 case screws. Plug in the batteries and line them up in their recesses in the case, ready for installing the wedge on the bottom. Connect up the daughterboard ribbon wire. This is probably the most awkward wire of the lot, but easy to install with some angled tweezers. Land the wedge over the batteries, secure it with the 4 screws and install the rubber feet. Finally, we're back on with the keycaps, and let's hear how this one sounds without any foams. I'm really happy with the foamless typing test, and I ended up using it for a day before deciding I felt it needed some foam in there. It's always a great thing to be able to run without foams, which I think you can on this one, as it sounds great. For me personally, I think the gaskets start to feel a little free and sloppy without the case foam, and I think I'll prefer the sound on this one with some dampening in there, but not all of it. In the following builds, I ran case foam only, and then case foam and plate foam, so here's a comparison between the configurations I've ran so far. Note that on all the configurations I left the rubber dampeners under the spacebar, as it really needs them in my opinion. For me, the sweet spot on this one is both the case and plate foam in, but the switch sheet out. With the switch sheet in the keyboard, the sound just merged into the sea of aluminium keyboards running IXPE switch sheets, and the foamy sound just supersedes everything else the keyboard and build has to offer. With the switch sheet removed, the keyboard gets its own personality, and the sound profile becomes much more varied across the board as it should be. After doing my own build on this keyboard and a bunch of configurations to figure out my sweet spot in terms of dampening, this keyboard makes so much more sense to me now. The look is premium and unique, and during disassembly the quality was there to be seen, but it wasn't until I started experimenting with less foam that the typing experience caught up to the other elements of the keyboard. After 4 days of heavy use, I've really grown fond of the keyboard, other than the spacebar stabilizer, which will be getting swapped out for a Stabies V2 as it drops the wire loop too quickly. Being designed for a deep and thocky sound, by removing the IXPE switch sheet, I've removed that kind of forced deep and creamy sound profile and created a similar but cleaner sound profile by running the cream sodas and the GMK keycaps. In terms of the big selling point I mentioned at the start, which is the 1+1 being IQUNIX plus U in terms of building a keyboard layout for you, I really can't see how this is extendable right now. The top case is modular, so no issues there, but the bottom grey case seems fixed to this layout as there are no connections or gaps for extending right or left. It looks like the only way to put the numpad on this would include buying a completely different grey base. I also don't know if the wedge is long enough for full size, so watch this space on that one, I guess. I think the big questions with this keyboard are who is it for and is it worth the money? $349 as a bare bone places it in mode sonnet pricing, high-end KBD fans pricing, and really up there with some nice group buy keyboards, and one thing that does confuse me is that it's not a kit. Coming as a bare bone kind of pushes it towards people on their first upgrade from entry level, but the pricing and the fact that it's a group buy pushes it towards the enthusiast. As an enthusiast, if I'm buying a keyboard starting at $349, I want to build it, not buy it with switches already installed and keycaps in the box. Once I stripped it down, rebuilt it in the new configuration with my own switches and keycaps, it made sense to me, because it became a premium kit build. It kind of feels like it may have been marketed between two demographics. I'm an enthusiast. Keycaps and switches as optional extras are way down the list. I want more colorways, a bunch of external weight materials and finishes, maybe a few mounting options, but primarily I want to build it myself. That said, KBD fans sell fully assembled, ready-to-use keyboards, so there is obviously a market there for this. But if that's the target market, I would probably look to prioritise switch and keycap choices and ditch the group buy, because when taking a ready-to-use Odin V3 as an example, you're getting PBT fans keycaps and a lot of nice switches to choose from. But even with that in mind, for me it's a no-brainer. I've been an IQUNIX fan since I was a beginner, and I've been waiting for them to start releasing aluminium keyboards for a long time. With my own build and configuration, this sits alongside my other premium keyboards in my long-term collection, and I've quickly become very fond of it. And that's it for me on this one. I hope you found this useful, and I'll catch you in the next one.